All right, there we go. Welcome, everyone. This is a fantastic turnout. We had over 300 registration. There's usually a little bit of a drop off from people who attend, but it's nice to see the big turnout, and we'll probably be up over 150 or so by the time we're through the next few minutes letting people in. So this is our for End of Life Choices California. First of all, hi, I'm Mark Greenberg. I'm in San Diego. I'm the executive director of End of Life Choices California. This is our first time doing a big public webinar like this, so it's fantastic to see everyone from all the New York, Alaska, and in between, in California represented here. I'm really pleased to partner with Mandy Zucker, who is the executive director of End of Life Choices New York. And hello, Mandy.
Hello. Thank you, Mark. We're very excited to be here today. We are thrilled with the turnout. Obviously, there is a very strong interest across the country in this topic. So I'm going to share a little bit more about New York and what we're doing here, but I'm going to let Mark start talking about California. Once we've concluded with all of our speakers, we will have a Q&A. Feel free to put questions in the chat box now. We will be monitoring that, but we're probably going to wait until the very end before we answer questions, just to make sure we get through the whole presentation. So very nice to have you all. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mark.
Okay, excited to be here. If we want to share the screen, share the...
1 second.
So who are we? End of Life Choices California. We're good. Our mission, just as a quick overview, is that we provide Californians the information and support to successfully navigate their legal end-of-life options. That's on the next one. There we go.
Sorry.
And what does that mean? So basically, that means we're a social service organization. So the services we provide are a warm line. We have a phone number that you can call on our website. You can go in and request support there. We get a little over 100 inquiries a month or so. We raise information and awareness through presentations across the state. So if you have a group or a community that would be interested, please let us know. Our big differentiator is that we do day of ingestion or day of death support. So we will come to the home of someone who is choosing to take the medication and mix the medications, be with the family, be with you, and help walk you and talk you through the process. Go back one slide, please.
Okay. I'm going back. Oh, am I
2
going the
slides.
wrong way?
3 slides.
I'm going the wrong way.
Okay.
There we go. This one?
So, yeah, we love the elephant. We talk about this issue being the elephant in the room. You see the elephant there, is that, sometimes even if he's standing in the middle of the room, no one acknowledges me. So this is just an acknowledgement that just by engaging in this conversation, you're taking a step that a lot of people haven't yet. So what is medical aid in dying? So simply put, it's a legal option allowing a physician to prescribe life-ending medications to a terminally ill and mentally capable adult to control the timing of their death. And then what are the eligibility requirements in California? So in California, and there's some differentiations between California and New York in terms of eligibility. For here, you need to be a California resident, an adult, physician's diagnosis of a terminal illness, and a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. We recommend people that they look into hospice, as that kind of is a pre-qualifier for eligibility. That you need to have the mental capacity of making informed medical decisions. We can probably get into that a little bit in more detail in the Q&A. And the ability to take the medication in a small amount of liquid independently. You need to be able to self-administer, self-ingest the drug. The majority, the vast 90 or plus % of people will mix the medication with apple juice or some Vermont, I'm told they use maple syrup. There are other options to mix it with to swallow it. If you are unable to swallow, there are options to take it through a G tube or through a rectal catheter. The process in California is similar to everywhere across the country. You need to make two verbal requests to your prescribing physician, and those need to be a minimum of 48 hours apart. So you make the request day one, day three is when you're eligible to make that second request. One of the things about California is that when the law was originally passed, that waiting period was 15 days. But in subsequent legislation, it was reduced to 48 hours. You need to fill out a written request that's signed for by two witnesses. One of them needs to be unrelated to you. And then the attending and consulting physicians, they cannot be one of the witnesses. One of the things that our organization does is that if you're having trouble finding a witness, one of our volunteers is able to come to you with some notice and be a witness. Just one note about our organization, we have over 100 volunteers up and down the state. And then once that part is done, then a second consulting physician will confirm the eligibility. And then at that point, the prescribing physician can write the prescription. That will go to a special pharmacy, a compounding pharmacy. So you're not going to your local Rite Aid to pick it up in general. And then it will be filled and dispersed to you. Those are the basics in California. And just like a quick look at the map, you can see where the green in some form are states where medical aid in dying is a legal option. Oregon and Vermont, you do not need to be a resident. New York, Mandy will talk about, and Illinois is coming online shortly. Delaware is the latest state to have joined us in the implementation as their law went into effect in January of this year. So that's a little bit about us. Mandy.
Thank you. I'm sure that you do presentations that are an hour just on those slides. So thank you for walking us through that as quickly as you can. Okay, I am going to share also a little bit about New York and why it looks basically the same but slightly different. So let me share my screen. Okay, so just a little bit about us, End of Life Choices New York. My name is Mandy Zucker. I'm the executive director, and our mission is to expand options and to improve the quality of life for people at the end of their lives. We do that through educational opportunities, sort of like this one, through outreach campaigns. We provide support to families and individuals who are considering their options. And we advocate for patients for their rights to be able to make choices about their own body. Okay, so some of our basic requirements, I'm not going to go through all of them because many of them look very similar to California. There's just a couple of things that are a little different. In New York, there is a mandatory capacity evaluation. Either a psychiatrist, psychologist, or I don't have on here, but a neurologist can assess that you're capable of making the decision and that you're not being coerced into making that decision. But that is mandatory. So in California, you don't have to have that evaluation unless a doctor feels like it's necessary. But in New York, everyone that wants medical aid in dying will have to have a capacity evaluation. Okay. I wanted to just sort of highlight that medical aid in dying is a process. It is not just go to your doctor and get a prescription. Part of that process includes an oral request by the patient asking for care. Again, in New York, a little different than any other state. That oral request must be recorded either on an audio or visual device and stored as part of the patient's medical record. No other state requires that. So that's a little bit different in New York. The other thing that's a little different is our waiting period. So Mark mentioned a 48-hour waiting period between doctor visits. We have no waiting period between doctor visits, but we do have a waiting period at the end. After the doctor writes the prescription, sends it to the pharmacy, there is a 5-day waiting period before you can actually pick up the medication. So that's where our waiting period is, and it's at the end, and it's 5 days. And And I also wanted to just highlight the Academy of Aid in Dying Medicine. We are working with them for clinical purposes. So as New York comes on board, we have lots of people, professionals who are interested in making sure that they're providing excellent care. The Academy of Aid in Dying Medicine provides incredible training and support, mentorship, coaching for really any clinician, a doctor, a social worker, a chaplain, a pharmacist, anybody that really has responsibilities in this process. So we are working with them, and you can check their website out and learn more. So if you're interested in more training for clinical purposes, you can let me know, and I'm happy to connect you. Okay.
Always looking for prescribing physicians in any state.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, we're doing that part. We will be helping people when they call us and saying, I need a doctor. We're keeping a sort of confidential list of doctors that we will be able to reach out to and provide connections for individuals and families. So,
Yep, same here. Yeah.
good.
Excellent. So let's go into a little bit of the history of the organizations, a little bit. So how did each of us get started? We'll start in California. And first hear from Lynn Calkins. Lynn's one of the founders of End of Life Choices California. She's still on the board. She's still actively involved in our program and our program development. In March 2024, she was diagnosed with bulbar ALS, which affects the head and neck, and thus it's impacted her speech. So she's going to be giving her presentation through a speech assist application that she has written, and she plugs into the system. And a few years ago, the organization did a video about us, and from there captured about an hour of Lynn talking. And that was one of the things, one of the sources for finding her voice to be able to use it in this type of process. So Lynn, I will turn it to you.
Greetings, everyone, from sunny Southern California, and congratulations, Mandy, David, and all of you there at End of Life Choices, New York. We are so darn happy for you finally getting your Medical Aid in Dying Act passed. We could burst. My name is Lynn Calkins, and I'm one of the 4 founders of End of Life Choices, established in 2019. We are...
Nope. Lynn, we can't hear you.
We'll give you a second and see if you can get that going again.
Today we celebrate passage of your Medical Aid in Dying Act after 10 long years. Happily, it coincides with the 10-year anniversary of our own California End of Life Option Act. Mandy and David, I've admired you and your dedicated team for years from afar, thanks to your newsletter updates, and I'm thrilled to actually meet you in person today.
Well, we're happy to have you, Lynn. Thank you for
sharing. We're pleased and proud to have had our own End of Life Option Act for the past 10 years. I must tell you, hooray for you already having in place your strong foundation and broad base of support before your law even passed. California had no such statewide support when our MAID law was enacted in June 2016. We had the law, but no clear way for Californians to access it. Several of us had been volunteering under the auspices of Compassion and Choices, CNC. Like you, we campaigned hard to get our MAID law passed. A key driver in our campaign was Brittany Maynard, a young newlywed who knew her brain cancer was terminal and wanted to use MAID while she was still able. She opted to move to Oregon and use their MAID law, but she was pretty angry that she had had to leave her home in California to attain a peaceful death. She offered to be CNC's poster child in California's MAID campaign. We are forever grateful to Brittany and her husband, Dan Diaz, who lovingly supported her all the way. Because Brittany was so young, so vibrant and articulate, her story resonated with the public and with legislators. We achieved our MAID law 4 years ahead of schedule. Woo-hoo, there was dancing in the streets. We California volunteers shifted slightly and continued to provide information, education, and bedside support under the auspices of the National CNC organization. Then one day in the summer of 2018, we were informed that CNC was closing its volunteer program that very day. We weren't sure why, and were not given an explanation. We all went our separate ways, but we missed the meaningful work of helping individuals and their families with end-of-life questions.
Do you want me to take it from here, Lynn? You got it? Okay.
A few months later, 4 of us volunteers hatched the idea to create a nonprofit organization just for Californians, following the models of End-of-Life Choices, Oregon, and End-of-Life Choices, Washington. There was just one tiny problem. We had no experience in such an undertaking. We were clueless. We scoured websites like yours and others looking for ideas to build one of our own. We learned we would need to file articles of incorporation, form a board of directors, write bylaws, and recruit and train more volunteers. We needed a mobile phone and an email address, brochures and business cards, and apply for tax-exempt status. There was so much to do. Somehow we were able to accomplish all we needed and more within just 6 months. I'm told that's some kind of a world record. It makes me tired just looking back and thinking about it. I attribute this achievement to the wisdom and experience of our outstanding board of directors, a few smart, experienced, supportive, MAID law cheerleaders who had been champions of assisted dying in their own unique ways since the 1980s at their local and state levels and within their own professions. And now in 2026, thanks to our amazing paid staff, comprised of Mark Greenberg, our executive director, Leah Polikoff, our volunteer and program manager, and Amber Valenzuela, our education and outreach lead, we are now more organized and focused on our mission than ever before. We are indeed fortunate to have staff with the depth of nonprofit experience the 3 of them embody. Nearly everything we do with and for our 100+ volunteers now has a training and/or a mentor, as well as a feedback loop to ensure competence, confidence, and standardization in our volunteer activities. Our most recent and ongoing projects include outreach and training to hospices and to identify unserved and underserved areas and populations of our huge state so that all Californians may know MAID is available. Mandy, David, whenever you were defeated 9 times, instead of giving up, you and your intrepid EOLCNY volunteers have doggedly persevered these past 10 years, doing the heavy lifting of building a program that is well known and highly respected, and now you are rewarded and ready to blast off and implement your new MAID Act instead of fumbling around in the dark after the fact, as we here at EOLCCA did. We know your path to a New York MAID law has been painfully long and arduous, and sadly, many New Yorkers were unable to achieve their peaceful deaths. But that was then, and this is now, and here you are in this liminal moment, ready to go forth and help New Yorkers navigate their new, long-awaited MAID law. I hope other states desiring a MAID law are watching you, New York, and learning from you. We Californians are here to help in any way we can. Congratulations. End of life choices, New York. You did it. We are so proud of you. You rock.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
All right, we're going to turn it over to David, who's going to share a little bit more about our history, how we got to where we are. So, David, our former executive director.
First of all, thanks very much for the kind comments, Lynn, and thank you, Mandy. It was a long haul. 10 years is quite a long time, but we finally did it. So I want to go through a little bit of a history of medical aid dying in New York and how we got to where we are today, because I think End of Life Choices New York, along with other organizations, really played a critically essential role in the enactment of the law. So first of all, of course, we had to get sponsorship. And it's critically important, in my view, to really find sponsors who are get legislation passed, but who also are passionate and are in a leadership role. So we initially went to my legislator in Westchester County, Amy Paulin, who is the legislator who gets more bills passed than any other assembly member, fortunately, and she agreed to sponsor the bill. Thereafter, we were influential in getting the highly respected then chair of the Health Committee, Assemblymember Richard Gottfried, to become a sponsor. And we worked with them and Senator Diane Savino, the initial sponsor in the Senate, in crafting the bill and then various amendments to strengthen it over the 10 years it took to get the bill enacted. They were all champions of the bill, and their leadership was essential in getting more sponsorship of the bill each year, so that eventually we had a large majority of Democrats in both houses sponsoring the bill. Very early on, we decided to try to get editorial and media coverage, and we met with the editorial staff initially of the Buffalo News and Albany Times Union, and then others followed suit in getting and having supportive editorials from those newspapers. We were on numerous radio shows, had dozens of letters and op-eds published in numerous papers, including the New York Times, and helped draft op-eds for others, including doctors, people with disabilities, and others to submit. We were extensively involved in the planning for and successful legislative hearings that were held both in Albany and New York City in 2018 by securing people to testify and giving testimony. And we had two of us give testimony ourselves. I was one of them, and Judy Schwartz, our former clinical director, was the other person. We met with legislators and staff and with many other advocacy groups over this 10-year period. So for the decade between the time the act was introduced until it was signed into law, we essentially attended dozens of meetings with the essential help of our lobbyists. And I do think it's very important that if you can afford one, that you have a lobbyist, at least one. And we met with numerous legislators and staff members. We were able to secure doctors, patients, family members of patients, and people with disabilities to attend many of those legislative meetings. We contributed significantly in those meetings, and we believe we had a positive influence in securing additional legislative support for the bill. We also attended dozens of meetings with other advocacy groups, advocates and lobbyists, including Compassion and Choices, Death with Dignity National Center, Death with Dignity Albany, Completed Life Initiative, and we also eventually formed what was called the New York State Alliance for Medical Aid in Dying, where we contributed in important ways. We were involved in getting numerous organizations to support the Medical Aid in Dying Act. So eventually there were some 60 organizations that were in support, very few in opposition, except for the New York State Catholic Conference, a few disability rights organizations. And I can tell you that those organizations had a positive influence. Eventually, we actually got the Medical Society of the State of New York to support the bill, although it had once been an opponent. We were very much involved in working with the Hospice and Palliative Care Association of New York State on amendments that they had proposed to the bill. And they too were an opponent of the bill, but then became neutral as things progressed, and they realized that the bill really did have sufficient safeguards to satisfy any of the concerns that they may have had. We were very instrumental in getting the New York State Bar Association task force on medical aid in dying to take a position in favor of the bill. I think, frankly, without our involvement, it's possible that the task force may not have taken a positive position, given its initial makeup. Although we were not invited to serve on the task force, and someone from one of the advocacy organizations should have been, because we have so much expertise and experience with medical aid in dying. Despite that fact, we did a lot of work behind the scenes after the creation of the task force. The early testimony that we gave, I think, was extremely helpful in setting the stage for a positive outcome. We worked really hard to ensure that the task force received accurate and relevant information, and that misleading, false, or irrelevant claims or assertions were refuted. When they had an open hearing over a course of a morning where people could testify for several minutes, we got a lot of people to testify in support, and there were about 30 or 35 who did so, only a few in opposition. And so the State Bar Association Task Force was almost forced to take a position in support, even though I think initially they were inclined not to do so. We also were very much involved in polling to gain the support of several senators. End of Life Choices New York spent a lot of funds to conduct a statewide poll and polling in the districts of several legislators who were on the fence about medical aid in dying. And what happened was, because of the additional support that we saw in the polling, almost all of those senators who were on the fence, 5 out of 6, actually became sponsors of the bill. Following passage of the Medical Aid in Dying Act, the lead sponsors praised End of Life Choices New York for our involvement, and Assemblymember Amy Paulin said that I'm so grateful to End of Life Choices New York for their incredible advocacy and unwavering commitment, which have made such a powerful impact in helping advance the medical aid in dying bill through both houses and of the legislature this year. Senator Brad Hoylman, who became the lead sponsor in the Senate, eventually said End of Life Choices New York provided critical assistance for the passage of medical aid in dying in the New York State Legislature after nearly a decade of efforts. So we are extremely proud that we now have a bill in New York that's going to be taking effect August 5th, 6 months after it was signed into law by the governor, who actually had a very difficult time, frankly, in deciding what to do because of her devout Catholicism. But eventually she was swayed by all the positive aspects of medical aid in dying and how well medical aid in dying has worked in jurisdictions that authorize it now. So I'll conclude here but just to say that we are really excited about moving forward, and Mandy's been doing an exceptional job in leading the implementation effort in New York, along with the Academy of Aid and Dying Medicine.
Thank you, David, and thank you for being on our own advisory council. Appreciate that as well. Want to get into some of the stories that people have experienced with medical aid and dying and turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you. I'm coming from Berkeley, California, and great to see people from coast to coast on this webinar. I have the privilege of sharing the story of my Aunt Ellie, who was an early utilizer of medical aid and dying in California. In 2016, she was diagnosed with metastatic ovarian cancer and, as most do, underwent chemotherapy and surgery, but her cancer never responded. And Ellie was fiercely independent and knew she didn't want to suffer unnecessarily at the end of her life. She learned about medical aid and dying becoming law the same year as her diagnosis through Compassion and Choices. And it was from them that she learned the steps required to get access. She really didn't know if she would use it in the end, but she really found comfort in the idea of having the option. Getting access to MAID turned out to be a huge challenge for her. She started with her own treating oncologist who hadn't heard of it, wasn't willing to support her use of it, and simply told her no, didn't provide any alternative doctors or options. The family ended up searching across Northern California looking for a doctor in her health plan who would support her access to MAID, and it was nearly impossible. Eventually, we found a very kind surgical oncologist in the Bay Area where I am. She was in Sacramento, and that doctor expedited an appointment with her. But to get to that doctor, that first doctor of the two that would be required, she had to make about a 5-hour round trip, which she did do, but really with much pain and suffering. However, that visit did get her that initial physician approval that she needed. But what she needed next was a second physician, and she couldn't find a second physician. So after the 15-day California period had passed for the second request, Ellie visited her primary oncologist again. She had a very emotional heart-to-heart with that doctor, relaying that there were no other doctors who were willing to be the second to support her access to MAID. And that primary oncologist did eventually reluctantly agree to verify that she had less than 6 months to live and qualified for MAID under the law. But that oncologist also explicitly stated that she did not support my aunt's decision to use MAID, that she thought, in her view, my aunt should continue to undergo palliative chemotherapy right up until the very end, and that she was only doing this because her role was just to verify that my aunt had less than 6 months to live and otherwise qualified under the law, but she was not supporting my aunt's access in any way. So my Aunt Ellie had great relief when she finally got that second physician. She received the medications. It was such a challenging process. It really took quite a bit of time and emotional, and with the transportation and multiple doctor's visits, physical suffering. And she really did feel at the end of her life, her last few months, that having the MAID medication enabled her to live her fullest life in those last few months, because she knew she had the comfort that she wouldn't have to suffer more than she was willing to at the end. Once her cancer progressed to the point that she was confined to her bedroom most of the time, in continuous pain, with an open surgical wound that never closed after her initial surgery and that required daily care. She was exhausted, sleeping most of the day and nights, and with basic bodily function shutting down, she sent out an email to her 2 sisters and 2 nephews to make a date to take the medication. Making an appointment for a death was a really surreal experience, as was the day when it came. It was incredibly hard to say goodbye for family and for my aunt on that day, but she truly was happy knowing that she was empowered to avoid further suffering, to be able to say a final goodbye to those she loved the most, and of being surrounded by family as she took her last breaths. My mom, who is on this call, helped to empty the 100 capsules of secobarbital that was used back then, which my aunt was too sick and weak to do herself. And got mixed in with some liquid, and my aunt toasted to the beauty of life before she drank the medicine. And she quickly went into a deep sleep, and she never woke up. All the information she got on MAID was through compassion and choices, and she was so thankful for being in control of her suffering at the end that right before she drank the medicine, she asked all of us to continue to support the right of people to access MAID. To honor her memory, I started volunteering with End of Life Choices California a couple years ago by attending Day of Deaths. In the almost 10 years from the beginning of my aunt's journey, I can tell you that the difference in the experience from then to now in California is profound. There's a 48-hour waiting period instead of a 15-day waiting period. Rather than requests being needed to be made in person, they can be made through remote visits. Hospice is aware and often accepting, if not helpful, now in California. The medication is easier to mix, it's easier to take, and in particular, end-of-life choices chapters exist and really give incredible information and support to people, including identifying supporting doctors, which was my aunt's biggest issue. A silver lining to my aunt's experience is that in the following years, we learned that her primary oncologist changed her mind and became a supporter of MAID. I think it was the continued exposure to the law, more patients requesting it, and hearing about the relief that patients have from simply having the option and how that really does allow them to live their fullest life. I thank you for this opportunity, Mark and Mandy, to share my Aunt Ellie's story today. She'd be so happy to know that many more people in this country have access to MAID than ever before, and in particular that those in California don't have to face the same immense barriers that she did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. G, I sent you a note that changing the order.
Oh, okay.
Mandy.
No problem.
I'm going to ask Jeremy Bowl to speak next, just because I think he has to leave exactly at 8, so I want to make sure we have time for Jeremy. So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you to go next.
You bet, Mandy, and thank you so much. And thanks to you and Mark and to everybody for giving me an opportunity to participate in this incredibly important and moving webinar. My name is Jeremy Bowl, and I'm an internist and geriatrician in New York. I spent the first 10 years of my career co-founding and running a program to care for people who are homebound in Manhattan with late-stage and serious illnesses, including many people who were terminally ill and were able to die at home, including people with ALS. I then went on to a number of executive roles in health systems, and I retired from my final role as Chief Clinical Officer for the Mount Sinai Health System in November of 2023, when I was diagnosed with ALS myself. And when I received my diagnosis, having cared for so many people with late-stage illnesses and especially ALS, and bearing witness to so much suffering, it was very, very challenging for me to gain any measure of stability emotionally. I was genuinely filled with panic and dread about what the rest of my life was going to look like. And it took a few months to start to get back to baseline and to start to get back to the sunny side of the street. And the thing that I think helped the most for me was recognizing that, this wasn't 1990 anymore when we started our home visit program. This was a time when there were states where medical aid in dying was legal. And I had the resources and the connections and the means to establish residency in another state if I needed to, or to go to Vermont or Oregon where there's no residency requirement. And once I knew that was possible, then I was able to live again. And I really found not just that living with ALS could be possible, but that I could return to my old, regular, joyful self. And I have ever since making those arrangements. But in the process of making those arrangements and appreciating just how therapeutic it is to know that medical aid in dying could be available to me should I need it, it was clear to me that I wanted every New Yorker with a serious illness to know that that would be available for them as well. And so, I was very, very fortunate to get connected to Mandy and to David and to End of Life Choices New York and to Compassionate Choices and jump on the bandwagon. I was a late member to the party, but for the last couple of years, I've partnered with them and many others to tell my story and the story of many patients that I cared for, and that our health system cared for. And again, to try to bring a human face to, what can feel like an abstraction in so many ways. And now that we're very close to go live, I've been very busy with David and Mandy and many others working on implementation. And I know, at the deepest levels, that even though very few people ultimately choose medical aid in dying, um, so many more people are comforted in knowing that it's there. That's my story, and I know that's the story for so many others. And so I'll keep at it until I can't anymore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Gia.
Yes. Hi. Am I on the screen? Okay.
There you are.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for asking me, Mark, to be part of this, to share our family story. It means a lot to be able to do it. So thank you. I'm Gia Sandell. I'm from Southern California. And my husband of 39 years, Tim, was diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, and that's kidney cancer. And it was January 2023 when he got the diagnosis. It was stage 4. And with distant spread, it had spread throughout many organs and many systems in his body. And needless to say, we were in an absolute panic. It was such a shock to us because he was so healthy, and we called him our Superman. He rarely had a cold. He was that person that you just can't believe when they get sick, especially with something like this. One of the first things he said to me when he was diagnosed was that he refused to just waste away, as he said, and that he wanted to do death with dignity. And he would quote it like, I want to do death with dignity, should the time come. He was he was in shock and despair, as we all were. Early on, I did a little research and I came across EOLCCA. And I did learn about MAID in California, but because I was in such a funky, stressed out state in my mind, I just remember them being more of a source of information about the law. And I for sure didn't realize that they would come the day of, that they would offer assistance and support. I wish I had. It would have made things a whole lot easier. So Tim started treatment at City of Hope in Duarte, California, with one of the top kidney cancer oncologists in the world, and he was wonderful. And because of the many treatment options, there was more hope for living a really long life with this cancer than we thought there would be. So Tim didn't want to think any more about end of life. He wanted to live positively, think positively, just didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. So we let that go, and we were trying to be positive. And Tim was put on a daily chemo pill. For kidney cancer, you don't go on the usual chemotherapy that you think of, where you get a rest after a certain amount of months. It was just every single day, and he had every side effect imaginable. It was really, really difficult. It's one of those things where we learned over that next year and a half how hope can be a double-edged sword, because it was so terrifying to wait for the scan results, which were sometimes good, but more often they were really bad. When the treatments stopped working in June of 2024, that was about 17, 18 months later, we were told it was time for hospice. We were given a list of suggested organizations, and we chose one of them based on testimonies and really good reviews. Our son and daughter and other family and friends gathered around him, and we spent a lot of quality time together for but I would say about 3 weeks. It was kind of quick once we had put him on hospice, just how he really started to get worse very quickly. He was in a lot of pain in his bones primarily. And the pain meds really helped at first. And so he told us he thought he wouldn't want to do death with dignity, as he still called it, because he thought the pain meds would help him enough and to where he would have every single day possible here. He didn't want to leave this world one day sooner than he had to. He wanted to live more than anything. And so the day came, though, when it became too much to take, and he told us he wanted to do it after all. So now I was in a mad rush to put everything in motion for him. I was able to find the 2 doctors necessary, as is required, but during my search for them, I was told by some that I would have to jump through huge hoops, and that most people that ask for it and get it never take the meds anyway, and it would be just very, very difficult for me to do so. There was such an effort to dissuade me from moving forward, but I knew I had to. Sorry. So Tim was at a point where he could barely speak, and we were told that he was going to have to, within a small window of time, give his consent. And luckily, he was able to do that. But one thing he was struggling with was swallowing, and therefore he needed a catheter to be placed so he could ingest it that way and self-administer it. Hospice was unsupportive. They wouldn't help us with the catheter. And I was in a complete panic for 3 days, trying to find someone who would do it. They didn't want to do it based on the reason that we were requesting it. And I called every nurse I could think of that I knew personally, including online concierge nurses that I didn't know. And I finally found one who would be willing to do so for us as long as she left before I mixed the meds. After I mixed them, which they didn't come with instructions, that was a tough thing because I had been told that through the catheter would be possibly a different amount of medications to mix together versus swallowing it. So my son and I found ourselves Googling what amount of meds and what amount of water for the catheter. And that was just such a surreal moment that we'll never forget, that we were actually Googling it at that moment. But after I mixed them and we were all able to say everything we wanted and say our goodbyes, our kids said their goodbyes. I was alone in the room with Tim, and he self-administered the drugs, and he fell into that deep sleep with my lips on his. And it was the most peaceful ending I could ever imagine. After a year and a half that was filled with such pain and anxiety, it was actually a beautiful, peaceful death. And I'm so thankful for that. So 6 months later, I read more about EOLCCA, and I decided I wanted to volunteer. I did not want Tim's death to go in vain and our struggle to go in vain. I was trying to figure out how I might be best able to help with the organization. So it was kind of baby steps for me, but I joined a bereavement group that they offer, and it was unlike any other bereavement group I have joined since or that I could ever join. I mean, to have the same perspective with these mostly women, but a few men. I still keep in touch with several of them. I'm now volunteering, sharing my family story, reaching out to people to let them know that they have choices. I'm doing some outreach, and hopefully I want to help them navigate through the barriers that they might encounter, that we encountered. Hopefully they won't have to. So 2 things we would have done differently. We would have chosen a hospice that was supportive of MAID. We could have known that ahead of time. We would have had help with the catheter, and who knows what else we may have needed. And 2, we would have planned to have the prescription on hand way before it was almost too late. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Gia. Appreciate you sharing, and we're so grateful to have you as part of our team here now. Is David here, and is Rachel here?
I'm here.
So next up, we have David Timoner. Some of you who have seen the movie Last Flight Home, a documentary film about his father and his journey through MAID, and Rabbi Rachel Timoner here as well, to share about their experience with MAID. I think is the movie on. I saw it on Paramount Plus. I think it's still there.
Yeah, it's
Um,
on Paramount Plus
and
and Amazon
and
as well.
Amazon and probably
Yeah.
Apple and everything. So
Yeah.
I will turn it over to the two of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Who goes first, me or you, Rich?
You go
I think
first.
I go first,
You go
right?
first, Dave. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for having me, everybody. I just wanted to talk about our experience with end of life choices and medical aid and dying. When my 92-year-old father, Eli Timoner, the loving provider and pillar of our family, asked for us to help him end his life, um, our family was shocked and desperate to help him. He'd been paralyzed for almost 40 years when he suffered a stroke after having his neck cracked at the end of his weekly massage. Post-stroke, he was paralyzed. He lost the ability to walk. He walked with a cane, couldn't drive. He could no longer. He was pushed out of the business that he founded, the company that he founded. Um, but he was still somewhat self-sufficient. He still was able to get around and do things, and he was still a very vital member of our family. Um, but towards the end of his life, last year of his life, his mobility was really diminished. He started falling a lot. It would take him 20 minutes to walk 30 feet from the chair to the bathroom. It's just like his left leg that already didn't like to move really just stopped working. So towards the winter of 2022, I guess it was, no, 2021. Um, sorry, 2020, 2021. He had a fall and a lung infection that landed him in the hospital. And basically, in the hospital, they determined that he was a fall risk and he would be bedridden and would have to move either permanently to a nursing home or that was really the only option. He was not going to be able to be at home and walk around and make turkey burgers in the kitchen and stuff. So when he heard that news after 40 years of bearing the burden of his paralysis very bravely, he basically told us he was done. He was tired of being poked, he was tired of being prodded, and he wanted to exit on his own terms. Um, so, thankfully, after I hung up on that Zoom call where he basically said, I want out, a Zoom call from his hospital bed, I was able to quickly do a Google search because I didn't know if it was possible to grant his wishes. A quick Google search revealed that there was a law in California and that we might be able to help him. I found End of Life Choices California. I called them instantly, left a message, and just moments later, I got a phone call from someone named Lynn Calkins, and her kind, calm voice was like a ray of light from a lighthouse, just reaching me on a dinghy being thrown in the waves, basically thrown in a rough sea. She told me everything I needed to know about the process, about finding a hospice organization that did medical aid and dying, what we needed to do, and she told us that it was possible. So we found a hospice organization. We brought Dad home from the hospital. We set up hospice in the living room, put a bed in the living room, and the look on his face when he heard that he could actually do medical aid and dying was priceless. He was so happy to have agency after so many years of being having diminished faculties. So we started the 15-day clock. And my sister Andi, a documentary filmmaker, she set up cameras all around him, running almost 24/7 because she didn't want to forget her father's voice or face. And then over the next 15 days, he had visitors, in-person visitors, Zoom calls with old friends and employees. And it was just, he just slowly seemed to lighten. He just became happier knowing that he was in control and he could do what he wanted to do. And as the day approached, it just became like a very holy experience. Rachel was there as a rabbi and a daughter, and we all gathered around him. The whole family gathered around him, and we said our goodbyes, and he dispensed advice, and it was just a really, really meaningful, beautiful thing. I haven't experienced many deaths, but I've heard that this is what's called a good death, and I'm very grateful that my last memories of my father are filled with love and joy. And I'm so appreciative of this law and of End of Life Choices California and Lynn out there for being there for me when I really needed her. Thanks.
Thanks, David. So David told this story so well, and he was the one in the family who figured out how it could be done, thanks to Lynn, who's on this call. And I'm a rabbi. I live in New York, and everybody else was in California. And you may know that in Jewish law, traditional halakhic Jewish law, like original Jewish law, this is absolutely forbidden. Like hastening a death is forbidden. There's no exceptions to that. But when our father expressed his deep, deep wish to end his life, there was not even a moment when I questioned what I would think about that. Like we were going to be there for him and do everything we could to help him achieve his goal. And as a rabbi, that was complicated for me. I'm also I'm a public figure, and I lead a community, and I knew it would be controversial. So I wrote an op-ed in the Forward, major Jewish publication, explaining my position and why I felt that Jewish law should change, which happens around other things, and it had not happened around this. And over time, actually, both the Reform movement and the conservative movement of Judaism did change the position, and ended up writing what's called a responsum, saying that essentially what my position was. They didn't do it because of me, but they did it for similar reasons, which is that there's the reason that was Jewish law, and I think it's obviously not just Jewish law, but in other religions as well, is because of the desire to honor the sanctity of life, to preserve the sanctity of life, to never dehumanize, to never devalue life. And the case that I made, and that these that the Reform movement and conservative movement also took, was that now we need to ask a new question of what does it look like to honor life? That honoring life is not just extending it, but honoring life has to do with minimizing suffering and also honoring the deep wishes of someone who is experiencing that suffering or experiencing the end of life or approaching the end of life. And so I was, as David described, there with my family and there to support the whole process at the end, and as a daughter to experience it. And our sister ended up making a film of the footage that she took. None of us knew that was what was happening at the time, but then that film has gone out, and it ended up being, I think, helpful in other states and where people are trying to pass this law. It's, I think, influencing people, which is really gratifying. And I'll just say I was involved in the campaign in New York to try to get it passed. I went to Albany several times. I met with several state senators and assembly members. And in fact, Andrew Grenardis and I were just texting today. I was reflecting on his courageous change. He was one of the senators who had been against it and then became for it. And I had a lengthy process with him where I was trying to support him in making that change. So it's become an issue that we've all ended up working on, which was not something we expected, 5-10 years ago, but it's something now is part of our lives. And I just want to express my gratitude for all of you who have been working to try to get these laws passed. As a rabbi, I have congregants who've needed this, who haven't had it. I've had congregants who had ALS and who had other diseases and suffering at the end of life, who desperately wished for this and it was not available to them, and now it will be. And that is so deeply important. So thank you all for making that possible.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you, David. Um, Appreciate it. We've got some, we're here. We're happy to answer some questions. If there's some questions in the chat that people want to throw our way, we can take a crack at them or disperse them out to one of our speakers.
And while we're looking through those, I'll just say, yeah, to Rabbi Toner and to David that I tell everybody about the film. I mean, it is an incredibly powerful film, and there's been others about medical aid and dying, and the way that you all, I know you didn't do it on purpose at the time, but I guess your sister is incredibly gifted and brought us in to love your whole family through this film was incredibly powerful. And for those of you who have not seen it and want people to understand what this process is like, the beauty and compassion that medical aid in dying provides for families, I highly encourage you to watch the film and share it with people who maybe are on the fence because it's quite powerful.
Fantastic.
I know some people we're 4 minutes over, but we're going to stay for questions. I'm going to just share my screen really quickly, just so people have our information. If you have to go, I want to make sure that you have our contact information for both organizations so you can reach out to us. And Natalie and Leah, if you have other questions or things that you are seeing in the chat that you want us to try to cover, we're happy to do that as well.
I saw a question about dementia and Alzheimer's. The way the law is in all the states at this point is to have the mental capacity in order to qualify for MAID. You need to have the mental capacity to make medical decisions. Now, capacity can be fluid, so it may be one of those things where you're confused at part of the day, but if you understand what you're saying at another part of the day while you're making that request or before you're taking the medication, that can work within the law. For people who do not have that mental capacity, the bigger issue becomes that you don't have the terminal diagnosis when you have, dementia, Alzheimer's, a disease where you no longer have that capacity. So the question becomes, can I do an advance directive so that if I can no longer make the decision, can somebody make it for me? The answer to that is basically no. There's a book called In Love by Amy Bloom that talks about her journey with her husband who had early onset Alzheimer's, and they made the decision, or he made the decision to go to Switzerland. Switzerland's laws are different than in the States. That's an option. There's another organization called Final Exit Network that can also be an option. And those are things that you can feel free to look into.
Hey everyone, I can jump in. I'm Natalie with End of Life Choices New York. So we had a couple of questions come in. The first one I'd like to highlight, it was a general question about how different organizations across the country, both California, New York, Compassion and Choices, how are we all working together? How are we collaborating and networking together?
All right, I'll go first, and Mandy, you chime in. I mean, there's several organizations, there's several groups, some informal, whether under the auspices of Completed Life Initiative that brings in the implementing states. There's a group called D50 that Death with Dignity puts together of all the states, including the states that are working to advocate for passage in their own states. Compassionate Choices is the one many people know of. They're a national organization, very large, have a very big footprint. They're more on the legislative and advocacy side. our organizations are more, well, you're transitioning into being more of a implementation side. So when I describe End of Life Choices California, I describe it as a social service organization providing support to people. We will support efforts to expand the law. We will support efforts to make modifications if we agree with those approaches. But our focus is really on raising awareness, increasing access to people in California.
And I would say the same thing in New York. I think it's been really inspiring to see how many states, especially states that don't have a law yet. So, California said before, Lynn mentioned that they didn't have end of life choices California till after the law was passed. So in New York, we've been very lucky that we've had an organization for many years working on this bill, and that's in place now before implementation. So that's amazing. And there's a lot of other states that actually do have organizations that are working on this. So we all meet fairly regularly because there are a bunch of groups. Mark mentioned some of them. David and I are also on a few of them. Natalie has joined us now. So there's a lot of groups where we're all kind of working together and learning what's worked, what hasn't worked, how can we support one another. We're doing some things, specifically to try to pool resources, tabling at national conferences, which we all can't afford to go to all the time. So we're pooling resources, and one of us goes and supports all of the organizations and things like that. So I always say we all play very nicely in the sandbox together. We want to support one another. When one state succeeds, I really feel like it helps all of us. So great question.
Good question. There's been a couple mentions of stopping of eating and drinking. Terminology with that is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, or VSED. I don't know if there's a book called the VSED Handbook. I'm sure on your website too, Mandy, that you have links for VSED. I know on our website we do for more information about VSED. There's a VSED directive. VSED is basically, you stop eating and drinking. And it's something that might be an option for someone. There's no law that says that you have to eat or drink. So that's an option for anyone. You might run into some hurdles, with medical staff or team, but it does become an option for the non-terminal diseases, the chronic diseases that you may have that are non-terminal, that becomes an option for you. It's something where you need a lot of support around. You want to have someone around you, and you need to make a commitment. There are some tips, on our website and elsewhere about, making a video for yourself to watch that. This is your decision. This is what you want to do. You don't want to have people cooking in the kitchen while you're doing something like that. But that becomes one of those alternatives if you don't qualify for MAID or don't live in a MAID state.
Right. And I'll just add that we also have advanced directives on our website for stopping eating and drinking, specifically for people with dementia. A lot of people will choose that option because medical aid in dying is not going to be available to them. So if that is something that you're considering and don't want people to, feed you when you no longer have the capacity to state that you don't want to be fed, it's good to make sure that your loved ones know that and to document it. Other questions?
Yes, the next question we had was about the medication itself. The question was, is it liquid? And then on day of ingestion, who needs to be present? Do you have to have a doctor with you? Can it just be family? Yes, so about what self-administration means.
I'm going to let you go, Mark, since you've actually, California actually does it already. So.
Yeah, it's a powdered. It's a combination of 5 different medications, each of which is enough to for you to die with. So it's a massive dose of drugs, but it comes in a glass bottle. I want to say it's probably about that much of powder that you mix with. We typically use apple juice. It can be bitter. So we recommend people have some sorbet or a popsicle or something beforehand to cut the taste of it. In terms of medical professionals being there, no. Medical professionals, especially if you're doing it orally where there's no medical intervention, we don't do rectal catheters. That's where you need a nurse or a medical professional to do that. But for someone who is taking the medication orally, there's no requirement for a physician to be there. It could be family, it could be somebody, a friend, somebody with you. A lot of people don't want to be the person touching a substance that's essentially, that is a poisonous type substance. So that's where our team comes in, is that you can call us. We will talk to you beforehand, go out and do a home visit with you beforehand if you want, and then come to your home and be with you for taking the pre-meds, mix the medication for you. All of our volunteers have large bore straws with them. Usually we'll bring some apple juice and be able to be there with you while you take the medication.
So I would say our experience, obviously we haven't had it yet in New York, but what we've been hearing from some of our neighboring states is most of the time doctors are not there. There are some doctors that are willing to come, typically not covered by insurance, so you're going to pay for that service. But there are plenty, and we actually plan to do similar things to California, where we will have volunteers, end-of-life doulas, those kinds of people to be there if you want it. And we will encourage all of our patients to be enrolled in hospice so that somebody from the hospice could be there if the hospice allows it, and certainly to call them after the patient dies, because you need somebody to come out and pronounce, and that actually can be a whole process if you don't have hospice involved. So that is a good reason to have hospice.
Yeah. And then there was a question about physicians. Is there a list or something like that? There's not a real list. Basically, if someone calls us and talking about, I want to get the medication, our recommendation is first talk to your own doctors, talk to your primary, talk to your oncologist, whoever's giving you the care. Number one, you're doing a great service because you might be educating them about the law that they're not familiar with. Then talk with the hospice. If you're in hospice, there are some medical directors who will prescribe at no additional cost. There are some hospice medical directors who will prescribe for an additional fee. Some of them will act as consulting docs, and then some of them don't do it. And that's usually because of who owns the hospice. It's usually not the medical director's personal choice. And then if none of those areas come through, then there is a field of private or concierge doctors who specialize in end-of-life care. And those are people are outside of insurance that you can pay for. There are some that we have building relationships with that can do telehealth for a reduced fee, or a severe sliding scale. A number of them all do pro bono prescribing, for their patients. And, sometimes you just have to pay.
So I think that's a good jumping point to the next question, which is around access. It can be expensive to utilize MAID. And so both in California and New York State, what efforts are being made to reduce barriers, help with costs? If you can share with us that.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's one of our priorities. We are very aware that certainly the medications are not covered. Likely in New York, the capacity evaluations are not going to be covered. You may be able to get, a conversation with your doctor, the request covered, because that is an end-of-life conversation, which is covered, but some of the pieces are definitely not going to be covered. And we are looking at creating funds to help patients, even with things like transportation to doctor's appointments, or, if you live in Albany and your doctor is in New York City and, getting there and, having to sleep over, all of those kinds of things become barriers. So we are actually trying to create a fund to support families who need it.
Mandy, is telehealth prescribing an option in New York?
It is an option. The first visit, it says that it does need to be in person, although you can have that waived if that is a burden for the patient. So,
Okay. The 10 years of California statistics into who is using medical aid in dying really underscored the question that was asked, that it's 85% white, more educated, higher socioeconomic classes. So that's, those are the people who've been using it. California, just for some context, California has about 280 to 300,000 deaths a year. In 2024, the last year we have the stats, a little over 1,500 prescriptions for medical aid in dying were written, and it was taken a little over 1,000 times. That goes to what Jeff was talking about a little bit in terms of just having the medicine is a comfort. So not everyone who takes it, who is prescribed it, will end up taking it. The access points is really opening dialogues with different communities and getting that going. In terms of the financial barriers, again, that's where working with physicians for pro bono or telehealth. We have a small fund to cover the cost of medication in some cases, and we have a small travel fund for volunteers to travel to support people where there's nobody else around to help them.
I'll also
Okay,
just
thank
add
you.
that, can I just add one other thing, Natalie? We are looking for people specifically in communities that are not represented. So if you are part of a community that you think needs more awareness or education or access, please reach out to, Mark or to myself, because we would love to, utilize you so that we can make sure that your community is aware of this option and of all of the support that they can get to access it.
And that's one of the things that we do run into as you're going out trying to have these conversations. Like, there's an ick factor. I don't want to talk about death. It's, going back to the elephant in the room. And we often say this, this is a planning conversation. And that's really what it's all about. It's making the plans and having things in place for yourself, for your family, so that they know what you want to have happen.
All right. The next question we had that came up was about residency requirements. What is the residency requirement in California and New York?
So California, you need to be a resident. How you go about that is up to you. I mean, that's something you register to vote, you sign a lease, you get on someone's gas bill. So those are the ways to demonstrate it. And then that's something that the physician who's prescribing will verify as you're going through the process.
You also have to be a resident in New York. I don't know, David, if you have more information than I do about how to prove residency in New York. It hasn't started yet, so I don't have a ton of information yet about what being a resident looks like.
The best way to do it is to lease a new home, which is now going to be your primary permanent home, as it will be if you're going to access medical aid in dying. That's the best way, but registering to vote or getting a driver's license in New York may also be sufficient to prove residency.
And just one follow-up that someone pointed out to me in the chat is that California's Medi-Cal will cover the cost of the medication. So if you qualify for the state Medi-Cal program.
Okay, we've had a couple more questions come in. One question pointed out about MAID is only available for some people, right? For some patients, depending on where they are in their illness. But generally, what efforts are both of the organizations here today doing to advocate for end of life, like improvement of end of life care, expanding what that looks like? So if you can share with us a little bit more about that.
Well, Natalie, you could probably highlight yourself and talk a little bit about what we're doing to, bring more awareness and access and quality to all patients at the end of their lives, because it's not just, Mark said before, like medical aid in dying is really a very small part. It's been a huge focus, and I hope it brings a tremendous amount of comfort to people. But the reality is, most people won't use it. So there's a ton of things that we do to make sure we're supporting people at the end of their lives.
Mandy wanted to highlight me. Oh, yes. So, hi, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm the program director at End of Life Choices New York. I'm the one popping into the chat trying to make sure I get everything. So, please reach out to me if you have any more questions about what this law will look like in New York State, all the efforts that we're trying to make in terms of funding support, reducing barriers to access, a volunteer program that we are hoping to launch by the end of the summer. All in preparation for our date, right, August 5th. We have a number of different events coming up and things online to be more involved. So please check out our website. I'll link it right after I finish speaking here. But yes, MAID is very specific. Even depending, whatever state you're in, it's still a very specific process. We get calls every day from people who are looking for some type of support and won't qualify, right? The nature of their disease or the situation that they're in, they just don't qualify. And so overall, we do a lot of work in really advocating, again, like expansion of options, quality of the options out there, making sure people are educated and know about what's available, knowing the words and the things to ask for when they're in these situations, because we know when a loved one or ourselves are in have a new diagnosis or entering end of life, it's usually filled with a lot of paralyzation, a lot of fear, a lot of emotion. And so, similar to what Mark said, right, it's really a lot of planning. You really want to think about your advanced care planning, your directives, where you're seeking support from, what hospice you maybe is in your area that you could, may need to enroll into, what kind of, if you want to consider MAID, right, if your providers are able to support with that. But again, overall, just what does this landscape look like? And so I do a lot of educational efforts, things like this, to be able to educate people, talk about it, right? And also like support the advocacy fight that each of us have to do at different points working in the medical system. And so yes, we're doing a lot more. MAID is our big focus right now, but again, in the background, we're doing a ton of other things. And so I will post the links to our website so you can check them out and just become more a part of this movement and this work and this advocacy effort.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a pretty MAID specific program, but whenever we're out in the community talking about things, we're talking about your spectrum of end of life options. And a lot of that is about the planning process going into it, knowing who your healthcare agent is going to be, who's making the decisions on your behalf if you're not able to, having the pre-conversations with your doctors, with your physician team, knowing what their attitude is on things going into things, and then knowing what your options are. I mean, we all know the option of continuing medical treatment. That's what we've kind of grown up to expect and do. But you also have the right to stop unwanted medical treatment. There are, whether it's palliative care, going into hospice, VSED, MAID, all of these things are out there for people to consider. If it's something personal to you and you have a question, there's information on all of our websites. But you're welcome to call our warm line, submit a request support form with what type of information you're looking for, and one of our trained volunteers is happy to help walk you through it.
Okay, I want to be very respectful of people's time, so it is just about 8:30. Mark, do you have any closing comments or?
I don't know. Can I throw Leah on here? Are you there, Leah?
I'm right here.
I don't know. Say something about our program, how to get in touch with us.
I think we have the website on the chat. You can also contact me directly at lpolikoff at endoflifechoicesca.org. I manage all of our client programs and our volunteer programs. All of our programs are free, including our virtual bereavement group, which is open across the country. So if you know someone in another state that has experienced this, they can attend our bereavement group, and then we can send volunteers bedside. And our phone team is amazing and very knowledgeable. And we can also do free in-service presentations. So if you have any questions about our program, feel free to reach out. We're happy to chat.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing is, or one of the last things would be, we're both super small organizations. We're an organization that's 7 years old with 2.5 staff. If this speaks to you, if you want to help us grow, feel free to reach out to us. You can donate online, and I'm sure New York would be grateful as well.
I will say we're actually in the middle of a campaign to raise $80,526 by 8/05/26. That is implementation day. So we are close. We're at about 70,000, and we actually have a very generous donor who has just offered an additional 25,000 if we get to the 80,000. So it's actually really important. We've got 6 weeks to get to 15,000 more dollars. So if you have ever thought, should I make a donation? Now's the time.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm really glad to see so much interest. And please reach out to either one of us if you have questions or any follow-up.
Thank you all.